The Order County Grand Master Spencer Beattie said around 10,000 Order and band members will take part in Belfast alone. The parades were cancelled in 2020 due to the pandemic, and this is the first full-scale parade since. The Met Office has issued an amber alert for extreme heat this Sunday. The alert covers most of England and parts of Wales, warning of possible dangers to life or serious illness from the heat, as well as disruptions to travel. This week could see the hottest weather ever recorded in the UK. This is GB News, and I'll have more as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, the field of Tory candidates to replace Boris Johnson is thinning already, with Grant Shapps pulling out of the race and backing Rishi Sunak. We'll hear the latest from our GB News political team. A surprise Conservative home survey of party members has put Penny Mordaunt as the frontrunner. We'll speak to one of her supporters, the MP James Sunderland. And we're launching our new series Commons Purpose, looking at issues which have united MPs from opposite sides of the aisle. Today, we're looking at support for the armed forces with Derek Thomas and Catherine McKinnell. Give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Yes, the Tory leadership contest is well underway, and on the 5th of September, we'll find out who will be the next Conservative leader and the new Prime Minister. Three hopefuls today have given speeches: Rishi Sunak, Kemi Badenoch and Tom Tugendhat. In a surprise appearance at Mr Sunak's launch, Grant Shapps pulled out of the race and endorsed the former Chancellor as the next leader. Let's listen to a bit of Rishi Sunak's speech this morning.
We need to have a grown-up conversation about the central policy question that all candidates have to answer in this election. Do you have a credible plan to protect our economy and get it growing? My message to the party and the country is simple. I have a plan to steer our economy through these headwinds. We need a return to traditional Conservative economic values, and that means honesty and responsibility, not fairy tales. As is the fact that once we've gripped inflation, I will get the tax burden down. It is a question of when, not if. And I will achieve this because I have a clear plan to get our economy growing quickly. We need to implement the radical reforms I set out as Chancellor, to the way businesses are taxed, to make our country the best place in the world to invest more, train more, and critically to innovate more. We need to use the new freedoms Brexit has given us and the new mentality it can give us to reform the mass of regulations, bureaucracy and constraints that too often get in the way. We need to build a new consensus on people coming to our country. Yes, to hard-working, talented, innovators, but crucially, control of our borders. This is the surest path to tax cuts that work, to keeping our schools and NHS strong, to properly funding our armed forces and keeping our country safe. So that is my plan. Tackle inflation, grow the economy, and cut taxes. It is a long-term approach that will deliver long-term gains for families and businesses across the United Kingdom. I am prepared to give everything I have in service to our nation, to restore trust, rebuild our economy, and reunite the country. I want to have a grown-up conversation where I can tell you the truth. A better future is not given, it is earned. That is why I am standing to be the next leader of the Conservative Party and your Prime Minister. Thank you.
And that was Rishi Sunak speaking a little early this morning. Joining me now from Westminster is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, it has been a busy morning. It's not just Rishi Sunak we've heard from, is it?
No, it has indeed been a very, very busy morning. I've just come from Kemi Badenoch's launch as well, where she talked in a very assured and confident manner, it must be said, about how it was time for a fresh start, batting away questions about her inexperience and suggesting that politicians for too long were suggesting we could have our cake and eat it. I wonder who she was having a pop at there, but then also turned her fire on the other candidate, suggesting that she was not going to get into a bidding war when it comes to slashing taxes, that would be an utter betrayal of everything that the Conservative Party stood for. Clearly a jibe. People like Sajid Javid, Jeremy Hunt and Nadine Zahawi, who have all suggested they would substantially cut taxes, along with Liz Truss, if they were to become Conservative leader. Tom Tugendhat, a little bit down the road from where we are here, also launched his campaign this morning, focusing again on this issue of his standing within the party, and particularly in relation to foreign affairs. Of course, he is chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. But ultimately, in the end, Gloria, politics is not about launches, it's a numbers game. Nominations open and close today. The one person we're really still waiting to hear from is Priti Patel, whether the Home Secretary will run or not. Though that number of 11 candidates has now fallen to 10, as you said, Grant Shapps has pulled out of the race, the Transport Secretary supporting Rishi Sunak. So let's have a brief look at those numbers. At the moment, you have to remember there's a threshold of 20. You need the backing of 20 MPs just to get on the ballot for tomorrow for the first round of this contest. Well, at the moment, we know that Rishi has got 45 MPs backing him, so he is well and truly on that first round. And in theory, would get into the second round, given the fact that the threshold is 30 to get into Thursday's ballot. The only other two people, though, at the moment who have met that are Penny Mordaunt, who's got the backing of 27 MPs, including in the last few minutes David Davis, the former Brexit secretary, and Tom Tugendhat, who has got the backing of 22, I think, MPs. As for everyone else, they've not quite reached that yet, though some aren't far away. Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, I think is 19, and Kemi Badenoch has got around 17, I think, so they're pretty close. The question is, will others drop out today as it becomes pretty clear to them that they're not going to be able to fight tomorrow? I mean, not least of all, Raymond Christie, who thus far has got the backing of himself.
And of course, Darren, it's not the public who will choose the next Prime Minister because it's a midterm. It is Conservative Party members, 100,000 or so of them. What do we know about what they're thinking in terms of preference?
Yeah, really fascinating this, isn't it? We got the timetable yesterday from Graham Brady. The idea is that this stage, if you like, of the selection process will come to an end potentially as early as next Monday, but more probably likely, I would suspect, in the middle of next week. And around the same time, Boris Johnson will be having his last Prime Minister's Question Time. Why do I say that? Because when Parliament becomes back in after its summer holidays on the 5th of September, that is when the announcement of the new Conservative leader and thus the new Prime Minister will be made, September 5th. In between that, we're going to see a whole load, a summer really, of hustings and political debates and TV debates between the final two candidates. Who are they backing at the moment? Well, interestingly, at the moment, actually, in the leads is Penny Mordaunt, followed by Kemi Badenoch. Must be said, two of the lesser-known names, certainly people who've not been in cabinet recently. Kemi Badenoch's not served in cabinet at all. Rishi Sunak is in third place. So it does seem that amongst the membership, they do want to see, it seems at least for the top two, names that have not necessarily been that closely associated with this government, certainly with this cabinet, certainly with Boris Johnson. But things do change, don't they? And that's the really fascinating, unpredictable bit of all of this, because in the end, over the next 10 days or so, it's all going to be about who drops out, where do their supporters go, who gets to certain stages of that. And we could be surprised by all of that. We don't know who's going to end up, frankly, in the final two. And then these campaigns do change people's minds too, that the more they see potentially some of these candidates they're not very familiar with, the Conservative membership, that may well massively influence who in the end they pick. So it is entirely unpredictable. It is not something I would want to place a bet on, or indeed even make a prediction to you about. But we are going to get to the stage, I think, later on today where a bit of that field will probably thin out a little bit further as it becomes clear to those candidates at the bottom end of the scale that they're not going to reach that number, that magic number of 20 to get on tomorrow's ballot. And the big question is, who will they back? Because that could prove quite crucial.
Very difficult for the opposition parties to get a hearing while all eyes are, of course, on who our next Prime Minister is going to be. The Labour Party are planning to no confidence the Prime Minister tomorrow in the House of Commons. That's not going to go anywhere, is it, Darren?
It's not. In many ways, Labour don't really need to do very much. I mean, they can just sit back and watch all of this to a large degree. And the reason I say that, and it's Boris Johnson who repeatedly said this, divided parties don't win elections. You look at the most recent opinion poll from Savanta, Labour are 15 points ahead of the Conservatives at the moment. Clearly, the public out there do not like divided parties, and that's where the Conservative Party find themselves. You're right, though, saying that Labour are going to put forward this vote of no confidence in Parliament. That's effectively to bring down the government altogether, and in doing so, that would almost immediately spark an election. But let's be clear about this. First of all, the Conservatives are not going to vote for that, and they've got a majority still of 70, 80. That's not going to happen. And second of all, let's also be honest about this. This is something the Labour Party, frankly, don't want either. Yes, they're doing this because they feel they have to. It's part of the political game. But at the end of the day, the Labour Party are not prepared for an immediate general election. This is all about sending out signals, political messages to the public, rather than any realistic possibility that somehow we've got a general election around the corner. I'm not entirely sure the public would want that either, given where we're at the moment.
Darren McCaffrey, our political editor in Westminster. Busy period for us all, but thank you so much for bringing us the latest. Thank you. We are going to be staying with the Conservative leadership contest. I'll be speaking to the Conservative MP James Sunderland next about why he's backing Penny Mordaunt. Also, we'll be joined by Labour MP and a Conservative MP in a new series we're calling Commons Purpose. They're both calling for more support for the armed forces. Before all that, let's take a look at your weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. An extreme heat warning has been issued for Sunday because of some exceptionally high temperatures expected, but for the rest of today, it's actually turning cooler for northern parts of the UK, albeit temporarily during the next few days, as a cold front sinks south. Now, that's moving into an area of high pressure, which continues to dominate our weather. However, the cold front means that there is a lot of cloud in the sky, certainly more compared to the last couple of days across the UK. It has brought some wet weather to the northwest, but the rain tending to fizzle as it pushes south. And just a few spots expected for Wales, into the Midlands, for example. However, as the cloud comes south, it will impact temperatures, mostly mid to high 20s, perhaps 31 there for London. Much cooler to the north of the cold front at 19 for Glasgow and for Belfast, but sunny skies for northern Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland behind the front, before some showers push in during the evening and overnight for mainly northern Scotland and perhaps the north coast of Northern Ireland. Otherwise, some areas of cloud further south. A cooler night in the north, but still a muggy one in the south, with temperatures staying up into the mid to high teens. Some cloud around first thing across southern parts of England, perhaps even a few light showers. That clears away, and then Wednesday promises to be a largely sunny day across much of the UK. But for Scotland, Northern Ireland, a bit more cloud and a few showers, mostly into the north of Scotland with a keen breeze here, and it will feel cool in the north. Average temperatures for Northern England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, so high teens, low 20s. But in the south, still the potential for high 20s. The heat continues to affect southern parts of the UK, and into Thursday and Friday that heat begins to build once again, and that means that there'll be plenty of sunshine for many of us heading into the weekend, but temperatures once again will become uncomfortable up into the 30s by Saturday.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Let's return to the Tory leadership race. A new survey of party members by Conservative Home has ruffled feathers this morning, with the former Defence Secretary Penny Mordaunt coming out as the top candidate to replace Boris Johnson. I'm joined now by the Conservative MP for Bracknell, James Sunderland. James, welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Hello.
You are backing Penny Mordaunt for the leadership. Why?
Well, many reasons. I mean, I think she's the pragmatic candidate, she's the common sense candidate, she's the one that's been untainted, I think, by recent allegations and events. She's been a proven leader for a long time, good politician. She turned her marginal seat around. I mean, she speaks for many of us, and I think that as a proven leader, as a credible candidate, as somebody who's humble, I think she carries the voice of many with her.
What's the danger, or how worried are you about her not getting to the final two? She's a top choice for Tory party members, we learn, but Rishi Sunak, he's way ahead on parliamentary support, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very fair point to mention. I mean, clearly there's a long way to go yet. We're not even at the first ballot yet. So I would hope that members do roll in behind Penny. Rishi is the runaway candidate, no question at all, but does not mean to say he's going to be elected at the end of the day. So I would simply urge members to look ahead to the next election, to look beyond the current leadership contest and to work out who is best placed to lead the country into the future.
Kemi Badenoch, another leadership hopeful, she has been talking this morning. She has warned against my tax cuts are bigger than your tax cuts bidding war. Why do you think it's descended into this? Why has this become the key issue?
Well, I think it's a bit silly, actually, because what you're looking for is responsible government, responsible candidates. Penny's said since day one that she will pitch her approach economically and fiscally between low tax and pragmatic policies. We've got to pay the debt back as well, of course, but this is about combining low tax with low inflation and with economic growth. And I think Penny's plan, as outlined today in the Telegraph, is the way forward.
Look at the nature of the race. Are you happy about the fact that any candidate who doesn't have 30 MPs by Thursday, I should say, will be out?
Well, I think the campaign is happening very quickly. It is a very, very fast race to find the final two. Yes, I'm not comfortable because you've got due diligence, you've got an awful lot of things to think about when you choose your next Prime Minister. But this is the way that the 22 committee has outlined it. This is the rule as we understand it, and therefore we need to follow it. And I think it's entirely right that we do get a process whereby all of the candidates that want to put themselves forward are then whittled down to the two.
And when it comes to choosing a Prime Minister, normally it is, of course, all of us who decide. Lots of people might think it's just a bit weird that, 100,000 or so Tory members are going to choose the next Prime Minister? Reassure them.
Well, I think this... Yeah, I mean, this is ultimately a party matter, of course. I mean, Boris Johnson's now gone. It is for the parliamentary party to decide the final two. I mean, look at Penny in particular. She's very popular amongst the rank and file Conservatives, very popular with the young. The SNP fear her, Labour fears her. She's consistently polling number one in terms of who the membership wants to be the next leader and Prime Minister. But I think it's right. I think we have to give membership a vote, and that will come at the final two.
The insight into the kind of things that people who are supporting the various candidates are doing. Are you in the tea rooms? Are you bending arms, buying people a drink? How are you getting people to come over to your way of thinking in terms of who is going to be the best person for the job and to back the candidate that you want to see as the next Prime Minister?
Well, it is a fascinating process. Clearly, lots of meetings are taking place, lots of canvassing is happening on the estate. We've got hustings tonight with the Common Sense Group. So members like me are getting the opportunity to meet all of the candidates. But what I would say to your listeners is that I would support any of them. They're all good people, they're all excellent, and ultimately who's chosen will lead the party to the next election. So we've got to get it right. But it is very interesting. I want to see an objective campaign for all candidates. Let's not lower the bar. Let's keep the bar high in politics. Let's talk up each other than talk down. And I want to see a very, very objective process whereby the best candidate comes through. But my vote is firmly for Penny.
What will you miss most about Boris Johnson? Is there anything?
I didn't catch that, I'm sorry.
What will you miss most about Boris Johnson, if anything at all?
Well, Boris Johnson is a magnificent character. I was loyal to the very end. His policies are excellent. I would hope, therefore, that the next leader will maintain those policies as they currently are, because I think they're the right ones for the country at this point in time. I'm not looking necessarily for a continuity candidate. I want somebody with fresh ideas. But ultimately, Boris Johnson did a lot of very good stuff for the country, and I think we'll miss him.
Final question to you. The calls for whoever wins this contest to seek a mandate through a general election will no doubt get louder. Shouldn't there be a general election when there is a new leader and Prime Minister?
Well, we've heard this before, of course. Boris Johnson became the Prime Minister in 2019. He then called an election. It's perfectly within the gift of the new leader to call an election. But personally, I think we've got work to do. We need to deliver the manifesto from 2019. I think we've got to rebuild that trust with the electorate. The next candidate must do that, somebody who is clean, trustworthy, full of integrity, no baggage. And I think ultimately it's in that person's decision and gift to do that. But we know we've got to go before May 24 at the latest, and it may be before that, who knows.
James Sunderland, Conservative MP, really good to talk to you today. Thank you very much. Enjoy the coming days. Later in the show, we'll be hearing from two MPs from opposing parties who are working together to get a better deal for our armed forces. Military has suffered huge cuts. So let's bring in our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, as ever, it is good to see you. So we're launching this new sort of segment on the programme about showing how MPs can work together to campaign for change. There's lots of these all-party parliamentary groups. We're going to start today's session by talking to two MPs who are working together for a better deal for our armed forces. But we thought it would be really helpful to me and to our viewers and listeners to just set the context, if you would.
Well, defence is one of those areas where there can be a lot of cooperation, and that's good to see that parties are coming together on this particular issue. Interestingly, Rishi Sunak was asked about his defence priorities at the launch of his leadership bid. And he said that he was because he was asked about not acceding to the demands that were being made by the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, about an increase to 2.5% of GDP for the armed forces. He said he was the Chancellor who actually has seen through the largest boost in military spending of any Chancellor since the Cold War. Now, that is true, but it comes against a backdrop of decreased spending over the years and the armed forces being hollowed out. Now, if we look at what the situation was at the end of the Cold War, there was 150,000 British Army personnel. In the year since to last year, that's reduced by 82,000. Also, at the end of the Cold War, there were 1,200 main battle tanks. Last year, that reduced to 227 main battle tanks. the projection now, under the latest defence review, is that the Army will reduce further to 72,000 with 148 main battle tanks. Now, many politicians and those in the military say that is just not sustainable, especially when you look at what has happened in Ukraine and, of course, the war of attrition that is now underway in Ukraine that's really shown that heavy armour, such as main battle tanks, is absolutely needed, even in modern warfare. So that's one area. The Navy is another area. Great deal of concern about the Navy. 130 ships the Royal Navy had around about the time of the Falklands War in 1982. It's now down to about 70. But of that number, there are only about 18, I think it is now, frigates and destroyers. They are vital frontline fighting ships. They're also needed to escort the two new giant aircraft carriers that the British Navy has. So yes, it's great that the UK, the Royal Navy now has two large aircraft carriers, but it really struggles for the escorts to escort these ships every time they go out on deployment. And also, they don't, as yet, have enough of the F-35 fighter jets for these vessels. We were told that the UK had committed to 138 of these F-35 jets. Now, defence analysts believe we'll be lucky if we get about half that number, which again, according to politicians, analysts, those in the military, just not sustainable to man two aircraft carriers and also to provide the aircraft that the RAF needs, because it's a dual force aircraft that both the RAF and the Royal Navy will operate. It's not enough to sustain those operations. So some real concerns about the military and military spending going forward. A lot of candidates have said they will boost spending. Rishi Sunak, as I say, said today it will be threat-based, is how he will approach it. But that rings alarm bells, because that's exactly what previous administrations have said when they hollowed out the armed forces. It was all threat-based, and the threat after the Cold War was seen to be lower, and as a result, manpower and equipment was reduced accordingly.
Mark White, brilliant setup and context setting from you as ever, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. So next we'll be discussing how we can better support our armed forces with our new segment, Commons Purpose. And we'll be talking free school meals with Labour MP Emma Llewellyn-Book. All that after the news.
It's 12:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Conservative candidates have been presenting their pitches to their party to take over as Prime Minister. This morning, 3 candidates have officially launched their campaigns to be the next leader of the Conservative Party and therefore the next Prime Minister. There are now 10 candidates in the race after the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps stood down and gave his support for Rishi Sunak. The 7 other candidates have announced they're going for the job. Everyone running needs to get their nominations in by 6 p.m. today. Each needs at least 20 supporters for their names to be on the ballot. Voting starts tomorrow. The country will have a new Prime Minister by the 5th of September. Meanwhile, the Labour Party has said it'll put forward a motion for no confidence in Boris Johnson's government. The opposition have repeatedly said that Boris Johnson should have left Number 10 immediately after he resigned as Tory leader last week. If the vote goes ahead, all MPs can vote on whether the Conservatives stay in power. If the government loses, it could trigger a national election. Some other news now. The government's announced a £1 billion plan to rebuild 61 schools. In James Cleverly's first announcement as the new Education Secretary, he said schools would receive state-of-the-art refurbishments. The Met Office has issued an amber alert for extreme heat for this Sunday. The alert covers most of England and parts of Wales, warning of possible dangers to life or serious illness from the heat, as well as disruptions to travel. This week could see the hottest weather ever recorded in the UK. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back to the briefing and Gloria.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. At absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Now, it's time for my first Commons Purpose, where we talk to MPs from different parties who are working together on an issue for change. And as you heard before the news, we're talking about our armed forces today who put their lives at risk to keep us safe. Do we treat them well enough? Well, joining me in the studio to discuss all this, Derek Thomas, the Conservative MP for West Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, and Catherine McKinnell, Labour MP for Newcastle North. Welcome to you both. I'm hoping that this can show the benefits of cross-party working as well as all the brickbats that you tend to throw at each other. So let's start with you, Derek. Successive governments have come under attack for not doing enough to support our armed forces. Is it fair to say that whoever's in government, our armed forces don't necessarily get everything that they need?
It's certainly fair to say that we could always do more. I mean, I represent a fantastic Navy base, RNS Coldjoes. I've seen in the time I've been the MP lots of things that we can do to improve the offer, both for people that go into the Navy, but also how we support them when they're there. But it's absolutely right that across Parliament, we're really wanting to make sure we give the very best support so these people can come and save and defend us when it's needed, and we've seen them do that.
And Catherine, it seems a long time ago since that last Labour government, but there were still criticisms of whether people had the right kit, people who were fighting to protect us. It's a common theme, isn't it? It's not dependent on who's in government.
No, and I think that as parliamentarians, it's one of the areas where I think there is a lot of cross-party agreement, that we rely on our armed forces, we depend on them for our security. It cannot be done on the cheap. But also we've seen, our security comes in many guises. And, if we even look at the recent pandemic and how the armed forces stepped up to deliver the vaccine and, secure our security in many ways during that time, I think we owe a debt of gratitude and appreciation. But appreciation doesn't always equal understanding. And I think that, as parliamentarians, is something we're working together on to make sure that not only do we talk the talk of appreciation, but we also understand what they need.
And how important and how useful is it to work from across parties? The House of Commons, it's such an adversarial place, Catherine. You're literally set up on opposing sides to shout at each other and hurl insults. So what's it like? How does it work? You go to a room and you all sit together from different parties and you're nice to each other?
So, I mean, as an all-party group, pretty much, yes. We sit in a room, we have quite frank conversations, we have, some trust that we can have those frank conversations between us and really come at it not from a party political perspective, even though obviously we're all steeped in our party's traditions of realities and challenges, but that actually we try to find the common ground and where we can make progress by working together. And I think that's true of a lot of issues, but I think when it comes to our national security and defence, I think we find common ground more easily than with others.
And what is it that you, through your deliberations and chats, what are you campaigning for, Derek?
Well, we're all constituency MPs who have constituents that are in the armed forces. They have families in our local schools. They have housing needs. They also leave the armed forces and need proper support when that comes to an end their career. So that's what we all have in common. That's what we wrestle to try and sort out. So in my neck of the woods, we badly need to secure investment in the accommodations provided, and that's been done. Right. There's all sorts of support. We need to get the best kit. So actually working right across party, understanding the issues, means that when we come to significant votes like the taking military action in Syria, for example, we actually have a grain of understanding about how this is right for the country and for our global interests and keep fighting for peace. But also, those on the ground that are actually be doing that work for us, what we're actually sending them and asking them to do.
So accommodation and kit, Derek mentioned. Is that the top of the priority list for you as well?
I say in the North East, often it's veterans that need support. You know, it's not just those that are serving now, who obviously are, high up there on the priority list, but those that have served, and making sure they are not discriminated against in any way in getting support services, housing. We have the local council work very closely. I represent veterans that come to me. Mental health support services, people who have served and it affects them for the rest of their lives. And I think we owe them not just a debt of gratitude, but a debt of help and support as well. And I think most constituency MPs will work to support veterans in their area as well.
How, if your young constituents approached you and said, well, I'm thinking about this, thinking about serving my country, what more noble thing is there to do? But I'm not sure. Is it still fair to encourage them to do so? Is there enough to make it still the most noble and worthwhile job that anyone could do?
Well, it's interesting because still in our constituencies, lots of us will have army cadets, or we'll have the cadets in the Navy cadets and others. So that's still available to them. But that's quite traditional armed forces. We've also have the real interest in cyber and what's happening in space, and the new role that the armed forces have. Also, it was for me in my constituency, what's happening undersea? How are the Navy protecting information cables, fibre optic cables, that carry really important information around the world? So actually, I think there's loads of opportunities for young people. So when they come to me, I will definitely find opportunities for them and how they can pursue a career in that, because it's very different to what it might have been 20, 30, 40 years, particularly when I was growing up, we had the Falklands and the kind of warcraft that maybe will put off some of our generation today, although some actually would want to be part of it.
Well, and also I think one of the big challenges is still diversity in the armed forces, and that's something as an all-party group we talk quite a bit about, we champion. We'd like to see, more women represented, more diverse minorities, making sure that it's not stale, pale, male, but actually we get the best and the brightest talent, and that it is attractive for people of all backgrounds to go into. To make sure that, we get the best talent in our armed forces. And that's something I think is incumbent on the armed forces, but also as parliamentarians to make sure we do our part to, promote and make sure people understand the exciting opportunities that are there.
Can I pick up on that point? So in the Sea Cadets, which are a big organisation in my patch, you'll go there and the groups will be girls and boys of quite different ages, some very young, some older, supporting each other, learning together, completely equal. But actually, if you go to the top of the tree in the Navy or in the armed forces, we're not seeing the diversity that Catherine's talking about. We're not seeing enough women at that very top of the armed forces. So there's much more work to be done to encourage those that are in the cadets right at the start of that to see that there's an opportunity in the future for them in the armed forces. There's massive work to do, and as an armed forces all-party group, we can wrestle with that and we can challenge those that come and brief us about how progress is being made.
Well, how lovely to put the party politics to one side during that conversation. However, Derek, the Tory leadership contest is underway. You are backing Penny Mordaunt.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I thought if I kept talking, I'd avoid this. But actually, I've got no reason to avoid talking in support of Penny Mordaunt. I mean, what we face is a country that's quite divided, massive challenges. The situation, Scotland vying for independence, all sorts of challenges around the country, the cost of living, what's going on in Ukraine. And if you look at Penny, and I know Penny extremely well, she was really one of the first MPs I was introduced to before I even became an MP. I believe she is the one who can bring the country together, who can really help to re-establish a Conservative Party for everybody, to let people know in my constituency, right down in the southwest of Cornwall, that we're on their side, that we have their interests at heart. And I think she can do that because I think she'll lead in terms of what's in the interest of the country rather than her as a personality or as someone that is just out for what she can get out of it. I don't see that in her at all. I'm not saying that's true of other candidates, but I absolutely don't. I see her as someone who's committed to public service, who can really bring forward the interests of Great Britain post-Brexit and sort out some of the challenges that we must resolve and resolve soon.
OK, good job there for Penny. Catherine, when you look at the diversity of the Conservative leadership candidates, how would you... Do you want to weep? Do you want to... do you feel a little like you want to blush? I mean, my goodness, if there is ever a Labour leadership contest, we know they're going to pick a straight white man.
So I absolutely, everything that I just said about the armed forces, I think we can put into politics as well. And I think diversity, I will always champion. And obviously women getting to positions of power and leadership, I think is so important. And we need to see that in the Labour Party. We have not had a female leader. But this is a vacancy for Prime Minister, let's be clear. Yes, it's for the leadership of the Conservative Party, but it's for Prime Minister. So it's a slightly different nature of competition, and it's quite a short process. But I think my big concern is that we are shuffling around at the top, and it's not going to solve the fundamental problems that we're seeing in our country. And if you just look at those statistics on child poverty that are out today, and I've been raising this for some time, and the levelling up agenda has no mention of child poverty or a strategy to solve it. And if children are growing up in the North East in poverty, we ain't levelling up, and it's as basic as that. So, we're talking about changing the leadership. It's right. I'm glad Johnson has gone, but really we should be talking about child poverty. We should be getting on with solving some of these genuine issues across the country.
Well, I can assure you, in light of those new figures today, that we are going to be talking about child poverty statistics in the North East right after this. It looks like Rishi Sunak is the one to beat in terms of MP support, not necessarily Conservative Party members. How's she going to do it? He's through, isn't he, Rishi?
That, I would imagine so, but let's not count. We haven't had any votes yet. We just know names. And there's an awful lot of MPs that haven't declared who they're going to support or how they're going to support. But what we'll get is tomorrow we'll know who's dropping out of the race. Those votes will have to go somewhere. Penny's done the mass amount of work just getting alongside people and explaining what her vision is for the United Kingdom. And there'll be lots of people that will question how do we win the next election. We absolutely believe that we can and we should and we must. And so the question in a lot of MPs' minds will be which candidate is going to be best for me to take on my particular opposition. In my part of the world, it's Lib Dems. Obviously, it's Labour in other parts of the country. And we need someone who actually can have a message and communicate to people wherever they might live. And that's where I think Penny has some strengths.
Final question to you, Catherine. Tomorrow, the opposition have control of the parliamentary order paper, what's debated and what's voted on. Isn't it a total waste of time to be having no confidence in Boris Johnson when he's halfway out the door anyway?
Well, I think there's a lot of concern that we have a Prime Minister currently in number 10 Downing Street, and he is still a Prime Minister, and he is still in number 10, who has lost the confidence of his own MPs and certainly lost the confidence of Parliament. So it's a very natural thing to actually have a vote on that matter, and for people to put, their money where their mouths are, really, in terms of confidence. And I think it's, the Conservatives can get on with their internal navel-gazing and leadership choosing, but fundamentally we've got a country to run and we need a Prime Minister we can trust.
So we did cross-party working, and we did a bit of political knockabout as well. But I think it is really good to show people where politicians can work cross-party, and I think the armed force was absolutely the right place to start for this segment. And I thank you both, Derek Thomas, the Conservative MP, and Catherine McKinnell from Labour, for joining us today. Thank you. So, London used to be the place with the most child poverty in the UK, but today it's been revealed that the North East is now at the top. 38% of children there are growing up in poverty. I'm pleased to be joined now by Labour MP for South Shields, Emma Llewellyn-Buck, who's led a debate on free school meals in Parliament today. But first of all, Emma, good to see you. Your reaction today to the news that the North East has overtaken London as the UK's child poverty hotspot.
Well, it just goes to prove, doesn't it, that the Northern powerhouse was vacuous and empty, and Levelling Up's a vacuous and empty phrase as well. Tory governments have never cared about my part of the country and never will, and least of all will they care about the children there.
About these figures, the North East is the only region to see an increase in child poverty in the last year. Newcastle and Gateshead have seen the biggest rises of any parts of the UK since 2014. What's happening in the North East? Why is it a particular challenge in the North East?
Well, I think it goes back to the government's failure to level up, failure to invest in our region. You know, despite all the rhetoric that we hear from them for decades, for over a decade now, they've neglected our area. They've not done anything to tackle low-paid and insecure work. They've done nothing to make sure that the welfare safety net actually props people up when they're in times of trouble through no fault of their own.
The government have introduced a one-off payment of at least £1,200 to low-income families this year. They would argue that actually they're spending quite a lot of money on helping people.
Well, I think that's a piecemeal stick and plaster measure. What they need to be doing is actually tackling the long-term causes of child poverty and getting to the root of it, which is making sure that people have enough to live on instead of announcing pots of money and then giving people a little bit here and there. That's not going to solve the issue. They need to look at this seriously and strategically, and they're not, because they don't care and they don't want to.
And you've led a parliamentary debate today on free school meals. These are debates where you make an opening speech, you get to put your points directly to the minister. What were you asking for today?
So I was asking for the eligibility criteria for free school meals to be extended to all families who are on universal credit, and also for automatic registration. Now, if that was extended to all families on universal credit, 1.3 million more children would get free school meals. The 800,000 who are currently missing out would get school meals. The 200,000 who are missing out because the registration process is so bureaucratic would get free school meals. These are really simple things the government can do. It's been fully costed out, £550 billion every year, and the government have said it's too expensive, but yet they were happy to spend billions on Tory friends and donors through the COVID pandemic. It just proves it's about priorities, it's about political will. The political will is not there from this government.
Keir Starmer has been very clear that every spending commitment must be funded. How are you going to get your own party to see this as a priority? He says that there won't be any uncosted spending commitments, but you want more spending.
Well, I'm going to continue working with the groups that I'm working with and make the case very strongly to our front bench and to Keir Starmer to make sure that this forms part of our next manifesto going into the general election.
When you made your speech this morning and you asked the minister for extra funding, just exactly how did they respond?
Well, the minister explained that it would cost too much. He discounted the numbers from the Child Poverty Action Group, who I know have researched this quite in depth, so I think that was rather rude. And he just basically said no, because it's going to cost too much. There was some glimmer of hope. He did say he constantly keeps eligibility under review, but the reality is if they're having to keep reviewing it, if they're having to keep putting pots of money in, there's something fundamentally wrong where people do not have enough money to live on, and that's what they should be looking at.
It's going to be tough for the next few months for the opposition parties to get a hearing. We're all absolutely glued to the Tory leadership contest. We all want to know who our next Prime Minister is going to be. So we've got the contest that's going to take us till September. Then we're going to be so interested to see what the new Prime Minister will do for our country. It's hard, isn't it, for opposition MPs, even leaders, to get a hearing in this sort of context?
It is, and I mean, the whole of Westminster at the moment is wrapped up in the Tory leadership election. But there's MPs like me who are continuing to do our job, continuing to represent our constituents, and that's what I'll continue to do. And I sincerely hope that we're heading into a general election soon, and that at the point we do, I've got in our manifesto that commitment to children who are going hungry and children who are living in poverty.
Emma Llewellyn, thank you for talking to us and a really important news story of today.
Thank
Those new
you.
figures that show the North East is the child poverty hotspot. Thanks, Emma Llewellyn from South Shields. Thank you. Your views on the politics of the day. Mark says, sadly, the army is no longer a lifelong career. Anne got in touch to say one of the reasons why Mordaunt has grassroots support is because she's ex-Navy, a decisive person with an incisive military approach. Darryl says the British Army has been reduced in the past 30 years. If politicians think they're trying to protect our country, they're making a bad job of it. John says, time for change. The people of this country should have the vote for the next Prime Minister. MPs can't be trusted. Noel says, we are having a new Tory MP forced on us, Tory voters, depending on who likes who, etc. So at the next general election, we will still not have any say in who runs again for the Tories. Thank you so much for getting in touch. We love hearing from you. Next, it's Alice Stewart in for Liam Halligan. You've been watching and listening to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. I'm back tomorrow for PMQs at 10 to 12. But first, let's just see how hot it is where you are.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. An extreme heat warning has been issued for Sunday because of some exceptionally high temperatures expected, but for the rest of today, it's actually turning cooler for northern parts of the UK, albeit temporarily during the next few days, as a cold front sinks south. Now, that's moving into an area of high pressure which continues to dominate our weather. However, the